Hello everyone and welcome to Beginner's Code. Today we are going to be looking at creating and styling our own buttons using HTML and CSS, and these buttons will change when we hover over them. Okay, so the first thing that we've done is I've opened a folder in my Visual Studio Code, and what I want to do is just create two files. So the first will be index.html and the second will be a main.css. So what we want to do is just link up the HTML. So I'll create a Html5 boilerplate if I can type. So now we have the boilerplate, and what I want to do is just link the main.css. So now if I save this and if I just quickly do a heading saying hello and save that, and then make the heading one say color of red and save that. And now if I open this with Google Chrome, we now see up here we have a red hello, which is good. So that means that everything is linked up and it is all working as it should be. So now if I delete these, and then what I need to do now is create 3 different buttons. And we want these buttons to be in their own space, so they will all be enclosed in a div. So div.buttons to make it a class. And now if I do div button times by 3, we now have 3 buttons, and we can give each of these an ID. So the first will be btn1. The second will be btn2, and the third will be btn3. And now in here, just want to add button, just to give it a label so it's not just an empty space. And there we go. So now if I head back over to Google and refresh, we now have 3 different clickable buttons. So what we want to do now is actually head over to our main.css file, and I'm just going to reset the actual borders. So some browsers come with a default style of their own, and it's good for coders to just refresh the style, strip it back and make it default. So what we'll do first is the body, so this will do everything. We'll make the margin equal to 0, the padding equal to 0, and then I'm just going to change the background color. So background color is 000, and then if I save, head back over to Google Chrome, we now have 3 buttons that are pushed right up against the top, which you'll be able to see, and a black background, which is perfect. Okay, so now we want to start styling all the buttons. So this will just be a generic style for them all. So we can actually target the buttons class. So this will be for the div. So this is the space that surrounds each button. So .buttons, we want to display them in a flex, then justify the content to the center, and then we want to align the items to the center. And then we'll change the direction to column. But first, if I just comment that out, head back to here and refresh, we now have these 3 very tightly packed together, but in the center, right at the top. So now if I uncomment this one and save and then refresh, we now have them in a row, which makes it a lot easier to style, a lot easier to see, and for this format we want them sort of a little bit of distance apart, so this works well. Okay, so now we want to move them down from the very top, so we'll just give a margin top of say 50 pixels, and then we have a little bit of space to work with, which is good. So now we want to actually start styling each individual button. So we can do this by targeting every button, and because we want all the buttons to roughly be the same size and the same kind of feel, we can target each one through just using one rather than the actual ID. So for this, we will give a padding to all sides, so 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 10 pixels, and then we want to give 30 pixels because the left-hand side we want to be pushed in a little bit more, so the wording is actually more in the center. And then we'll give a margin of 30 pixels, so that will give a lot more space to the buttons in between each other. And then a background color of, we'll say, of black again. And then display of flex. And then what we can do is justify the content again and then give it its own transition. So justify content center. And then if we give it a transition of 0.4 seconds, so this means that any kind of animation or hover effect or anything like that that we do will take 0.4 seconds for it to sort of kick in or start, like to finish basically. And then we'll give it a width of 125 pixels with a border radius of 15 pixels. So now if I save this and head back, we have three much nicer looking buttons. They have a border color which is different, so we can still see them. Obviously the text is changed, but other than that, they look like nice buttons, and we can still click them obviously. So if I head back to Visual Studio Code, the next thing I want to do is just to align the text and then give this spacing a little bit, give each letter a little bit of spacing. So align items, text align center, and then letter spacing of 0.1 em. So this is 0.1 of what it usually is, and obviously we have black writing right now, so we can't actually see the difference. So what I'll do is just comment that out, and then once we've changed it, I will show you what it looks like. So now we have the buttons all styled the same kind of way, so the same size, the same attributes. What we now want to do is actually target each individual button. So what we can do now is, because we have used the ID of BTN1, BTN2 and BTN3, we can now use these IDs to select each individual one. So BTN1, we just want to give it a border color of 9D, 8D, F1. And then we want to give it a color of the same. So this will make the outside and the text the same color. So 9D, 8D, F1. And then the same for BTN2. So border color will be D58936. And it needs a hashtag at the beginning. And then color D58936. And then BTN3, we'll do border color, and we will pass in C2E7D9. And then the color we will do exactly the same, so C2E7D9. Now if I save this and head back, we now have three different buttons that are slightly pushed more to the right. So this might need a little bit of spacing, a little bit more or less padding added to the left. So now what I want to do is just, as you can see, we have not much letter spacing. So now if I come back to this letter spacing line and uncomment it out, and then if we refresh, we now have a little bit more spacing in between each button, or in between each letter, which is nice. So I'm just going to change this padding to 20 pixels. And then if we refresh, it slightly looks a little bit better. I might change it to say 18. So 18 pixels, and then if we refresh, so that looks a lot better. It looks much more in the center, which is perfect. So now that we have 3 different colours for our buttons, we now want to add in the transitional effect or the hover effect. So what we can do first is we'll just create the hover effect for all 3 buttons, and then we will actually change the colour in a different way. So what we'll do is btn1.hover, and then btn2 hover, and then btn3 hover. This needs a hashtag. And then inside of this, what I'm going to do is change the border colour, and then give it its own box shadow and its own transform. So the border colour we want to be black, so this will be 000. The colour we want to be black, so that will also be 000. And then we want to give it a box shadow, so box shadow, and this box shadow will be slightly inside of it, so it's not going to be a shadow that looks like there's a light on it and then there's a shadow behind it. This shadow is going to give it a little bit more of a 3D effect. So we're going to use inset, and then 1 pixel, 1 pixel, and 5 pixels. And we want to give it a black inset or a black shadow, but we want it to be slightly translucent, so it's slightly the alpha is slightly down. So we can use RGBA, and for this we'll use 000 and then 0.6. My bad. And then what we want to do after that is give it its own transform. And for this we want to actually adjust the size of whatever is being hovered over. So we'll do scale and 1.2. So this will actually make the scale of the button bigger by 1.2 times. So now if we refresh this, we get a button that disappears because obviously the colour and the outside is all black. So, but as you can see, the size is actually starting to get bigger, which is perfect. So now we have each with the same hover effect. We just need to now change the colour for the hover. So BTN1 hover, we just want to change the background colour to whatever colour we've given to the borders, to the original buttons, so before they were hovered. So background colour, and then 9D, 8D, F1. So then we can do the same with BTN2 and the hover, and that will be background colour of D58936, and then BTN3 hover, background colour of C2, E7 and D9. So now if I save this and head back to here, we have 3 buttons, and as I hover over this one, we now have a slightly bigger button that has a very slight shadow on the inside, and it has changed colour. And the lettering is the same colour as the background, which is perfect. So now they are very smooth buttons, which is perfect. That's all for today's video. Hopefully this has helped your understanding of how we can use HTML and CSS to make our websites more interactive. If there's anything you're unsure about, please don't hesitate in reaching out to me by dropping a comment below on my website or through Instagram. Next time, we will be using some Python libraries to create our own data visualization project. Thanks for watching, and if you liked what we've been through today and you want to learn more, please drop a like and subscribe to my channel to keep up to date.